So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio and my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited to be joined by a fantastic guest in the form of Robert Rinder, or Judge Rinder. Thank you, Robert, for joining me.
Pleasure. Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I mean, I must just say, of course, happy belated birthday, because it was your birthday the other day. So, I mean, did you get to enjoy it properly?
I certainly did, and I'm suffering the after effects now. I'm monstrously hungover. I thought I'd really practiced getting my alcohol tolerance and resilience, really up to a muscly level during lockdown. But turns out I'm an amateur.
Now, of course, obviously this last year, like you say, has given people plenty of time to practice other things other than work a lot of the time. I mean, how did you find yourselves in the early sort of stages of lockdown? How did you cope? What were you getting up to?
As you can see, for that long kind of breathy pause, I did a lot of writing and a lot of drinking, and I taught my friends' kids through Zoom Tudor history and a lot of drinking, and I would plonk on my piano and sing arias to my dog, and then a lot of drinking, and I would also do a bit of free legal advice for people, and then a lot of drinking. And that's pretty much it, really. The day was always, paused at some moment just to continue with the light oiling. I was a bit like the late Princess Margaret, just sort of kindly and nicely oiled.
And I mean, of course, a lot of people through lockdown were learning new skills. I mean, did you find yourself doing anything you don't normally do, i.e., gardening, baking, anything like that at all?
Oh, good God, no, absolutely not. No, I'm perfectly comfortable with the limited array of skills I've got. I mean, I have no transferable skills. In the event of war, I'd have to be a hostage. I can't cook or fix things. My hands are like two unschooled clumps of turd. But I suppose the teaching was fairly new. But I mean, I just used to dress up as Anne Boleyn and, teach. Well, it's not much Tudor history. We used to start at Bosworth and go all the way through to 1688.
And I mean, it's also given a lot of people a chance to reflect on, what an amazing job our key workers do. I mean, the NHS, the everyone who's continued to work hard over this last year. I mean, what's your kind of opinion been of the hard work they're still doing?
I mean, it's where prose ends and poetry begins, isn't it? I mean, there are two types of people in this world, maybe more, but in effect, ostensibly, there are two: those that run away from trouble and those who run to the call of duty. And, here we have our key workers, especially in our NHS, that are, the most over-demanded and the most underthanked and underpaid. And suddenly the nation had to focus finally on not the extraordinary work, because they wouldn't want it to be called extraordinary work, but just the critically important, courageous things they do every day of the week, which hitherto were thankless. And here we were, realizing, forced, conscripted, if you like, to have to look and understand finally and fully about the contribution they make to each and every one of our lives. It was a really important moment.
I mean, if you could give sort of one sort of piece of sort of message to, the amazing staff out there who are working tirelessly, in the hospitals and all over the country, what would be the one thing you would really love to say to them?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can do better than thank you. I mean, what message do they need from me? Some overprivileged person. Granted, I used to do legal aid work and that sort of thing, and I've been trying my best, but it pales into insignificance compared to all of the work, that thankless work that the NHS does. The thing about the NHS, that's the other day, like lots of our public service, but especially the NHS, you only ever hear about things when they go wrong, but there's absolutely no rounds of applause for the countless hundreds, no thousands, tens of thousands of lives that are saved, of diagnoses that are made, of medications that are provided, of remedies and cures and inclusion, and just this extraordinary tapestry of things that really are the absolute best of who we can be as a society, and certainly who we are when we are at our best as Britain. Those always gone thankless, and here we were conscripted finally into having to go, oh yeah, there it is. So thank you. I mean, what more is there? Anything more would be Well, I don't know, but certainly not worth listening to.
It's just there's not enough, that there aren't words to put into kind of any sort of sentence that would come nearly enough of a kind of a message to say what an amazing job they do. And it's just annoying that there isn't those words to really sort of, you know, put into effect just how amazing they all are.
Well, I think thank you does it. I mean, you know, most people who work in the NHS don't really want more than that. They want to be properly well funded. They don't go in it to be mega rich. They want to be safe. They don't go in it to be, you know, applauded necessarily. Well, not necessarily, not at all. They don't go into it to make it about them. You know, they're part of this wide community, a team, which at its most fundamental level expresses what medicine is. You know, they work alongside each other in this broad community, not for honor, not for money, purely to deliver a service free at the point of sale for every single person. There can't be a more profound expression of who we are at our best. I mean, and for that, we just say thank you.
Now, for you, I mean, obviously, you know, being interested in law, where did the interest in law for you first come from? And did you always know you wanted to be a criminal barrister?
Not really. I mean, I did debating at university because I was so cool. And even though I was at university at a time when all of this Britpop was happening, I was with the cool crowd going around university, doing universities as part of my university but debating team. Amazing. I got so little sex, really, isn't it? Tons going out, but there you are. But yeah, the point is, I did debating. I was good at it, and lots of people went to the bar, and I got good traditional qualifications, you know, like all of the first class degrees and all the rest of it, much of which is important, but certainly not everything. And so I decided to go and be a barrister. It was only after I started as a barrister, which is unthinkable now, even 20 years on, that I realized that it was my fundamental calling to be somebody that stood between the individual and the state's capacity, or the immense power of the state to remove someone's liberty. I was jolly well going to make sure that was done to a standard that protected each and every one of us, most especially my client, who it started with.
I mean, obviously, there's so many different areas within law that you can sort of, you know, sort of be interested in. Was it always criminal law that was your interest?
Yeah, because it was the place where being an advocate was most important, and still is the place. So from jury trials to court of appeal advocacy to you know, making applications in front of a judge for sentence of a bail, you're on your feet arguing, making a case every single day, and that was hugely important to me. You know, it struck at the core of, certainly, I think, my most, well, insofar as I have any limited talent, whatever talent I had, and the thing I wanted to do, to be an advocate for the powerless, that mattered.
And also, I mean, doing that job, you have to be quite a confident, outspoken type. Is that something that you found quite comfortable doing, or did it take a bit of getting used to?
No, it didn't take any getting used to. Not. No. I was born, I think, with an innate, aggravating, annoying, contemptible capacity to point at the emperor and say, not only has he got no clothes on, but look at the size of his arse.
And I mean, I imagine that when the you know, the idea of doing Judge Rinder, the TV show, when that came along, that must have been quite exciting to do, because it's completely different to, although, you know, the legal side of it is something you're used to. I imagine doing the actual TV side of it must have been a new sort of muscle to stretch and get something to get into.
I mean, not especially, because I didn't really believe anybody in television, and it's a wise thing, you know, not to do, because most of them tell terrible lies. I mean, you know, they're not at all reliable people in any way whatsoever. If you're anyone who's listening to this working in television, you know who you are and you know exactly what I mean. And I didn't apply to be Judge Rinder. It just sort of happened through a series of very random events. I mean, profoundly random events. So, you know, I think I was prosecuting a case in Jersey and advising the government there on their obligations in a very important, challenging inquiry they were having, and then flew over to Manchester. There was my courtroom. I didn't anticipate any of this was going to happen. You know, case number one, a woman suing her wedding photographer. And Case number 2, I thanked her for bringing her mother to court. That's my sister, she said. Oh, good Lord. Case number 2, bearing in mind he'd come from a background in law dealing with, millions and billions of pounds, quite literally. And quite literally. And there it was. And then case number 2, I said something, well, that's £10,000. Excuse me, £10,000. That's £100, that case. And I said something very silly, like, that's not a lot of money. And then, even though we're very regulated and whoever is running my show isn't allowed to talk in my ear, she did on this occasion say, do you want to rephrase that? You sound like a right posh idiot. Which is a perfectly reasonable thing to say. She was from Birmingham, by the way, for any of your listeners. But from there, I had this great gift and privilege of an experience, which was to be able to hear and to listen to the richness and complexity of lives that were beyond the recesses and limits of my own community. Real privilege, that is.
I mean, I imagine that, obviously doing a show like that. I mean, did you ever realize how popular it would go on to be? Because obviously it's loved by many. It's such it's a great show, and it's a great time slot as well, kind of mid-afternoon, people can just relax and sit in front of it. So did you ever think it would be as popular as it has gone on to be?
No, absolutely not. No, it went out on the death slot in one summer and it rained. And then, from there it found itself nestling neatly into the kind of the schedule. It was very random series of events, luck as well to some extent. However flat you're feeling, however permanent you think your condition, it's true of your health, it's true of however you feel in life. Remember that it's how you feel for now, that life quite literally can turn on a dime.
And I imagine as well that when you're on that show, there must be times that you kind of come across people and you really do feel for them, but you obviously have to keep the emotions out of it. So do you ever have times where that's kind of tough and you kind of want to be a bit more helpful to the individuals who maybe, very nervous, don't kind of know what's going on? So do you have to kind of rein it in a bit, or do you get a bit of freedom to be a bit more emotional with it?
There's two separate things. I mean, the first one is, I speak to the audience first, and lots of the case, most of the case you won't see. You might see 15 minutes of a case that's lasted for an hour and a half, even 2 hours on some occasions. And no, nobody comes into my court. I want people to be at their very best. I want their dignity to be absolutely protected and secured in every conceivable way. So if somebody comes in and they're nervous and worried, they're not going to be at their best. I'll spend considerable amount of time, as I would in any legal situation, putting them at ease. That's never an issue. But your question about sometimes do I get moved? Of course I do. Of course, I'm a human being, it touches a nerve. And above all else, the cases that matter to me the most, and perhaps the ones that I'm not just proudest of, but the ones that I think really demonstrate the power of the show, program, and the court, is where there's been real kind of toxic contention and conflict between the parties, and they go away having heard each other, that the courts provided them the space and the capacity and the rules to listen to one another, and then they've walked off with some kind of resolution that can be enormously powerful, especially in the context of families that have broken down over a period of years. And they finally say thank you and hug. And even if the program doesn't do it for them, it's just perhaps the first step in a long staircase of them moving upwards and on.
And like you say, I think it does tend to be with the families, maybe sort of parents and children. You get those times where you can tell that they're really, that there's something's gone wrong in the relationship. And yeah, like you say, you're able to just come in and sort of be the kind of the peacekeeper, or even sometimes a bit of counselling. That's not your job, but you get to kind of bring these families back together and help them speak and be listened to and help each other.
Well, the most important thing I do is to provide a space where, as I say, and I repeat, they're forced to hear one another. That really matters. God gave you 2 ears and 1 gob for a reason, and that in of itself is powerful. And oftentimes when something's broken down, it's never about the subject of the dispute, the money, the breach of contract, the issue of perhaps somebody not looking after goods that meant a great deal to the person who left them with a loved one. That's the law, can deal with that fairly quickly. It's about what those things meant to the person and why the person they're suing hadn't fully acknowledged the profundity, the seriousness and depth of feeling involved. And often things can be cured when you try to understand that and you have a real moment of hearing and you express, you don't signal, express in a way which the other person understands that they've heard what you've had to say.
And I imagine you must also get quite frustrated with some of the people that come on the show, because you do get these people that are very loud, who like to try and talk over you, who try and disrupt your court. So I imagine that you must get quite frustrated when someone thinks that they're bigger and better than you in your own courtroom.
I don't get frustrated. It just doesn't last very well. It doesn't last very long for them, and they never do well.
Do you find that kind of with those sort of people that, although, you know, it'll look good on TV, do you kind of think, oh, if you just listen and let me speak, I can help you here, sort of thing?
No, I never ever shut the door behind me and think, would this be funny for telly? Ever. Never. And no, I mean, sometimes I do think, and I'll say to them, you might not see it, look, be quiet, shut up. I'll say, shut up, I'll be talking or something like that, because this is an opportunity. Of course I'll tell them that. You know, you're not listening, madam. This is what he's saying, or sir, listen, it's a chance, a gift for you. And sometimes people are not able to do that, but oftentimes you can persuade people with the right seriousness and structure.
Now, we must also talk, because being on telly has kind of opened up doors for you. I mean, for example, Strictly. What was that like for you to take part in Strictly? I mean, looks like you had an absolute ball on that show.
I had an absolute ball on that show. There's no downside. It's unfettered delight and joy in every possible way. I mean, you know, sequins, jazz hands, and learning to dance. What's not to like? The only problem is people saying how hard I was working, when clearly I wasn't blooming working hard. You know, not just a dancer, but, you know, used to do 100-hour weeks, and I'm not one of, you know, our frontline NHS workers who do real work. You know, I telephone friends after a day, and, you know, one of them might be going into court with 3 children with their brief covered in sick, and all of that sort of stuff. And the idea of me phoning them up and saying, well, how are you? And her expressing her challenging day, and me saying, well, you know, I can't get this cha-cha, I'm working really hard. I mean, I don't think that would have gone down terribly well.
I mean, what would you say was the one thing maybe you took away from that show that maybe you learned about yourself, or that you've kind of thought, oh, I'm going to continue with that going forward?
I didn't learn anything from the show as such, other than one of the things that I do regret is that it was such fun. It went so quickly, and there's so much stress and hoo-ha around it that there are moments which were wonderful that I forgot to delight in and enjoy, you know, and it's very much a lovely experience in the past, as opposed to one which I was, I think, enjoying enough at the time. And those kind of represent all of my regrets, really.
And I mean, the other show that we get to see you on from time to time is, of course, Celebrity Gogglebox alongside Susanna Reid. So, I mean, what is that like? That looks like a lot of fun to just sit back, relax, watch TV and eat snacks.
Well, there you are. You just described it. And my dog farting, yeah. All good.
I mean, are you hoping to go back and do that show again?
I think probably not, no. I mean, I think that, you know, you have to be somebody that is sufficiently, I don't know, I think probably not. I mean, it's not everyone's cup of tea to be seen at home saying and talking about their real opinions about the world. And whereas I don't mind that, you know, I think the two of you have to be comfortable in that environment.
I mean, is there a dream going forward, something you would love to do, you know, a project you'd love to work on, or someone you'd love to collaborate with going forward?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I do, as you know, I mean, most of the work that I've made recently has been about history and Holocaust education and things. And I would like to make more documentaries where there are complex materials, complex things in the past, even controversial subjects, from crime to things in history, to, for example, a situation in Israel where people are, and it's what we're referring to afterwards, people are really gifted a chance, not just to learn the history in a way which is clear, but above all else to listen and to hear from the people who are actually there, those stories, so that they aren't just better informed, but they have a deeper understanding of why there is a situation and how people feel in it, and how we end up in situations of stalemate, and perhaps learning from it in order to help us all move forward.
And you've also been working a bit with Will Young recently. I mean, how did that come about, that sort of collaboration?
Oh yeah. Will. I mean, we were great friends we met on Strictly and we stayed very close friends. And he's written a beautiful book, a really truly wonderful book. Actually, got this in front of me. It's called "To Be a Gay Man." It's really brilliant. And I just interviewed him about it and read from it, and I'd advise anyone to read it. It's wonderful.
Now, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. But before we go, is there any messages you'd like to give to anyone who is in hospital at the moment, who's obviously not having the best of times at the moment? Any sort of messages you'd like to give them?
Well, gosh, imagine hearing from me. It's going to make them feel blooming worse. I want to say, as tough and as appalling and as gross as you might feel, find one joyous thing to focus on today. Find one moment of delight from the past, from the present, or an imagination in the future, because it's always a helpful way of bringing light into a dark space. So lots of love to you. Have a joyous day. And also, of course, thanks to everybody working at the NHS. You are, as I say, as we all should say regularly, not just clapping on our doorsteps from time to time, the best of who we can be when we're at our best.
I just want to say, Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again for your time. Of course, keep safe, and hopefully we'll speak again one day.
Thanks very much. Have a gorgeous day. Lots of love.